4. Theater.
Are any of you guys members of a fraternity or a sorority organization? Quite a few of you? Good. Luann, what is the traditional party during homecoming?
You mean like the kind of party? The toga party, I guess. We all get dressed up in bed sheets.
Right, the toga, the traditional dress of ancient Rome. That's what we're going to talk about today. Since we're studying Julius Caesar, that would of course be the type of costume we need to design for the actors. So if we want to create authentic costumes, we have to know something about the history of this type of clothing. Now, in the beginning, the toga was a large woolen blanket. The ancient Romans would wrap it around their body for clothing.
Wasn't it just the upper class that wore the toga?
At first, no. What you may be thinking of is the law that non-citizens were not permitted to wear togas. It was actually forbidden for foreigners to wear togas. But pretty much all Romans wore the toga ubiquitously for all kinds of different occasions. That didn't last too long though, because as you can imagine, or Luann, as you probably know, the toga is a little awkward. It's okay to party in a bedsheet, but try farming or going to war in one. So for activities that involved a lot of movement, the toga fell out of fashion in favor of more practical garb. Instead, the use of the toga in Rome became more and more restricted to formal occasions. That's good news for us, because the characters in Julius Caesar interact in mostly formal settings. Now, let me just tell you a bit about the actual toga itself. Historians believe togas were made from 5.5-meter semicircles of cloth. The cloth was cut into a big half circle, not a rectangle like bed sheets. This cloth was, of course, wrapped around the body, and a sash was worn over the left shoulder and under the right arm. To keep the thing from falling off, and we certainly don't want the togas on our actors to slip off during a show, the toga was pinned up with pins. These were called fivulate, in case you're interested. I have some pictures of authentic Roman fivulate on display in museums, so we can try to copy some of those designs for our costumes. Another option we have is to make a belt for some characters. Some Romans wore their togas with belts. Now, when we think of togas, we picture everyone wearing pretty much identical outfits, right? Basically, white bed sheets for all. Not quite. There were actually many kinds. For example, the toga virilis, or men's toga, was worn by adult male citizens. Women, on the other hand, had their own version of the toga called the scola. Toga pola, or black togas, had two functions. People of the lower classes wore them regularly, and people of the upper class would wear them after the death of a loved one to show that they were in mourning. That's important for us. We'll have to costume the slaves in our show in black togas. There was also a special kind of toga which featured a purple stripe and was worn by high-ranking officials and upper-class boys, or the painted toga, which was very ornate and worn on festive occasions by upper-class officials. Did anyone actually wear plain white togas? Actually, yes. The pure white toga candida was worn by senatorial candidates. Guess what? That is actually what most of our actors will need. We'll take a look at the character list for our cast a little later, but for the most part, it looks like our costuming will be pretty easy. We'll need mostly plain white togas that are just big half circles of cloth. That just means cutting and hemming. We'll also need to decide which characters to assign pins and sashes and which ones will get belts. Actually, the hardest job for the costumer in this show may be teaching all of the actors how to correctly put on their togas. We haven't talked about footwear yet. Of course, our senators in this show aren't going to be running around the stage barefoot. So let's take a look at how authentic Roman sandals looked.
Number 1. What is the topic of the lecture? Number 2. What is a key point in the talk? Number 3. According to the professor, what will the customer need to make? Number 4. Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
That didn't last too long though, because as you can imagine, or Luann, as you probably know, the toga is a little awkward. It's okay to party in a bedsheet, but try farming or going to war in one.
What does the speaker mean when he says this?
It's okay to party in a bedsheet, but try farming or going to war in one.
Five. Astronomy.
The invention of the telescope had a huge impact on our understanding of not only the universe, but also our place in it. It changed the way that people viewed our world and our world's place in the universe. Before the telescope allowed us to get a closer look at what was up in the sky, people believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, and everything else revolved around it. You can imagine why. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Why wouldn't people think that the sun was moving? It wasn't until the early 17th century, when Galileo invented the telescope and looked into the sky, that we found out this idea was wrong. Galileo didn't just point his telescope up at the sky and say, "Eureka!" He observed the sky by night and day for many years. The first discovery Galileo made with his telescope was that the moon had mountains and valleys. That may seem like a pretty mundane discovery to us. Even little kids know that today. But back then, it must have sounded pretty shocking. Another important thing he learned was that the stars are much further away from the Earth than the moon. And I'm sure there were plenty of people at that time who were uncomfortable with this idea. You see, it had been presumed that the stars were simply much smaller than the moon, but they were all part of this same sphere around the Earth. Galileo proved that assumption wrong. He noticed that when looking at the sky through a telescope, the moon seemed much bigger, but the stars were still tiny dots of light. How could that be if they were all part of the same sphere? Galileo concluded that the stars must be much further away. They appear smaller than the moon not because they are smaller, but because they are so far away. They don't look much bigger through a telescope because they're really, really far away. His next major discovery was that Jupiter had 4 moons orbiting it. This dispelled another common misconception about objects and bodies in space. In Galileo's day, everyone thought that the Earth was the only body that had objects that orbited it. This assumption was based on the fact that everything that could be observed from Earth seemed to revolve around the Earth. They couldn't see anything that revolved around other bodies. So the telescope not only gave people a better look at those bodies that they were familiar with, but it also allowed them to see things that they previously couldn't see at all. Galileo and other astronomers who were starting to follow his lead soon found more bodies in the solar system than anyone had thought. Then, Galileo observed that Venus had phases, just like our moon. Through his telescope, sometimes Venus appeared as a crescent, and sometimes it was full. Now, by studying these phases, he deduced that Venus actually orbited the Sun. Remember, people didn't know at this time that all of the planets orbited the Sun. They firmly believed that everything orbited the Earth. So this was an important discovery leading to our current understanding of the solar system. Galileo's discoveries and the notion that the Earth is not the center of the universe was a very difficult concept for people to accept. In fact, Galileo faced a great deal of opposition from the Church. During the Inquisition, he was arrested, threatened with torture, and put under house arrest for the last 9 years of his life. Today, we consider Galileo one of the most important scientists of all time. We have to remember that people felt very threatened by science in early times. Many people felt that science was in opposition to religion. In fact, some people still feel that way today, but that's another story. Today, we know that not only is the Earth not the center of the universe, it's not even the center of our own solar system, and our sun is not the center of the universe either. It's just one of millions of stars in an infinite universe. You can see why this kind of information made some people feel a little insecure. Galileo's ideas make the Earth seem pretty insignificant in the grand scheme of things, doesn't it?
Number 1. What aspect of the telescope does the professor mainly discuss? Number 2. What is the main idea of the talk? Number 3. What was the evidence for the stars being further from Earth than the Moon? Number 4. Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
Many people felt that science was in opposition to religion. In fact, some people still feel that way today, but that's another story.
What does the professor mean when he says this?
But that's another story.
Six. Campus life.
Hey, what's that you're looking at there? Can I see?
What? Oh, hi, Mara. Yeah, I'm just reading the campus newspaper.
The campus newspaper? Do people really read that? Is there anything interesting in it?
Yeah, actually. I was just reading an article in this issue on crime statistics for this university.
Campus crime? Surely crime isn't a problem here at our school.
If you had asked me 10 minutes ago, I would have said no. And, well, I guess overall it really isn't. Although it would be interesting to compare the situation with a couple of other schools.
So what does the article say about crime here? I didn't realize there was any. You never hear about anything.
Well, the article gives the figures for the past 3 years. Overall, the number of crimes committed has increased, but not in every category.
Oh? So what kinds of crimes were committed? What kinds have increased?
Well, as you might expect, nothing too serious. I mean, there weren't any murders or anything like that.
Glad to hear it. I guess that's something we would have heard about.
But there were a lot of cases of theft.
I suppose I did hear of several people who had their laptops ripped off, actually. And wallets tend to disappear too, don't they?
Right. I was shocked to find out that the number of thefts doubled from 34 to 70 during the first 2 years reported in this article.
Wow, that's a massive jump.
But then there was a decrease last year.
What are the figures for last year?
Still high, but only 60 as opposed to 70 for the previous year.
Perhaps we can thank the new security cameras.
Well, that's what I was thinking. But in fact, the number of burglaries soared from only 1 2 years ago to 9 last year. Here's how I see it. Laptops have become more common, so that may explain the increase in theft in recent years. People started carrying valuable things around with them. Then, a lot of people had them stolen, and a lot of people heard about it. Then they started being more careful with their stuff as of last year, and because people were being more careful with their stuff when they were out and about, the thieves had to resort to burglary. That's just my guess.
That sounds reasonable. So, any other kinds of crimes?
There were 2 sex offenses in the first year reported in this article, but none in the next 2 years.
Well, that's good. I hope it's not a case of them not being reported, though.
Good point. There were also 2 cases of weapon possession last year. That's a new crime. There were no prior cases of that.
Do you mind if I borrow your newspaper after you finish with it? I'd like to read the rest of that article.
Number 1. What is the topic of the conversation? Number 2. What is the main idea of the conversation? Number 3. What does the man say about thefts and burglaries over the past 3 years? Number 4. What does the woman imply when she says this?
Perhaps we can thank the new security cameras.
Skill C. Determining reasons, purposes, and attitudes. 1. Campus life.
What is that weird phone for, anyway?
The one with the blue lights?
Yeah.
That's an emergency phone. You just push the red button and you get campus security.
I guess that's a good idea. It probably works more as a deterrent than a phone, though.
What do you mean?
Well, I was just thinking that if you were going to attack somebody, you wouldn't do it anywhere near a blue light phone.
Yeah, I guess I never thought of that. It can also be used for other emergencies, though, like if you hurt yourself.
Does anybody ever use it, even when they don't have an emergency?
I think there's a pretty hefty fine if you do. I mean, if you press that button and don't say anything, they know your location and will get there pretty fast.
They know your location? That's a good idea. Sometimes you can't communicate in an emergency.
Yeah, that's why the prank calls are taken so seriously. They'll still come out here to verify that there isn't a problem, even if you don't utter a word.
So, what if you're inside and you need help?
Same as anywhere else. You call 911.
But wouldn't it be better to call campus security? I mean, they're a lot closer.
Yeah, you can call campus security and then they'll call 911. That's probably a better idea, actually.
Yeah, but then again, you're not going to take the time to look up the number during an emergency.
Yeah, it'd be a good idea to keep the number by your phone.
And what about those campus phones? For a normal call, you have to dial 9 first. So, do you have to dial 911 or does 911 work automatically?
No, I think you do have to dial 9911.
That's good to know.
Another thing, campus security has 2 numbers. You have to make sure you're calling the right one.
What's the other one for?
Non-emergency situations.
Non-emergency? Like what?
Like if you need to report a crime. You call 911 if there's a fire or if you have a medical emergency.
Yeah, or a crime, right?
A crime in progress, yes. But suppose you're not in any immediate danger. Suppose you are the victim of a crime, then you would report it to campus security by calling the non-emergency number.
Like if someone stole your history paper?
Very funny. No, but if someone stole your CD player, you could report that.
I wouldn't go to the regular police for something like that?
For a CD player, no. That's something you'd report to the campus police.
I've been really lucky. I haven't had any emergencies or crimes in the past 2 years.
Except for that stolen history paper.
Number 1. What are the people mainly discussing? Number 2. What are the main things they can do? Number 3. Why is there a fine for using the blue light phones in non-emergency situations? Number 4. Listen to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
A crime in
2. History.
Good day, students. I'm pretty jazzed about today's lecture topic, and I hope you all will be too. If you find simply remembering and regurgitating names and dates a little dull, then this topic may be of interest to you. There are names and dates involved, but today I want you to engage, weigh, and analyze the information I present. Sound good? All right, let's continue. In your textbooks and other various sources, you will encounter several contradictory theories regarding pre-Columbian discoveries of America. Can any of you clarify what I mean by pre-Columbian? Yes.
That means before Columbus arrived in the Americas, right? Before 1492.
Very good. That's correct. Most of us have learned that Columbus somehow discovered the continents, despite the fact that people were already living there. Doesn't really make sense now, does it? The Native American people who had been living in the Americas for thousands of years aside, there are several claims that Europeans, Africans, or Asians had visited the Americas before Columbus. Historians typically either reject or accept these notions outright. A good historian, however, avoids both of these extremes. Since I want all of you to become good historians, then you too should avoid both of these extremes. As I mentioned, you must engage, weigh, and analyze the available information before coming to a conclusion. And even then, such conclusions can be tentative at best. Okay, let's look at some examples. Let's begin with theories of early European contact. There are some sculptures of Peruvian gods that look nearly identical to Greek sculptures of Medusa. This has led to talk of an ancient Greek presence in the Americas. In addition, people of the Hopi Nation located in the southwestern U.S. have stories about Anasazi, or ancient ones who visited them. Some say the Hopi culture shows signs of Greek influence. Furthermore, the Aztec had a god called Quetzalcoatl, who featured a white beard and was said to have come from the east. Could this god have been an ancient Greek? Moving from Greece, now, there are also medieval Muslim reports from Moorish Spain. They speak of sailing across the ocean of darkness and fog and finding new populated lands there. While it is true that this ocean was the Atlantic, it is not clear if they landed in the Americas or just in some Atlantic islands. Okay, so far we have some artistic similarities, some possible physical similarities with the white beard, and some textual clues from Europe. How do you feel about these? Are you convinced?
Well, not really.
Okay, why not?
Well, I've seen the pictures in the textbook of the Peruvian Medusa, and, well, I think the Peruvian people could have just invented their own god with a passing resemblance to the Greek Medusa. I don't think it's really the same deity. Also, like you said, the text could have just been referring to some islands in the Atlantic rather than a new continent.
Great job! As historians, we must approach evidence with a skeptic's mind. There is, though, one clear-cut case with solid evidence. Norse Vikings did explore and settle present-day Canada at least 500 years before Columbus. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, the founder of Greenland, discovered a new land that he called Vinland, which is now thought to be in Newfoundland, a Canadian province. There would be at least 5 additional Viking expeditions to Canada and even some temporary settlements. At first, we found textual evidence for these journeys in Norse sagas. Since then, we have strong physical archaeological evidence to show this contact did take place. For example, there are the remains of Viking houses and villages, as well as old Viking tools found in the area. In fact, there are now 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Canada devoted to Viking archaeological remains. So, to reiterate, this combination of historical texts detailing Viking trips to the New World with actual physical evidence left behind by the Vikings allows us to say with certainty that the Vikings discovered the Americas long before Columbus. Now, there are numerous other claims relating to explorers from such places as Africa, Japan, and China. These are all very interesting and are fun to imagine, but all must be taken with a grain of salt. Accepting them without hard evidence would be just as irresponsible as dismissing them altogether.
Number 1. What is the talk mainly about? Number 2. What does the professor think of the contention that Columbus discovered the Americas? Number 3. Why does the professor mention that Peruvian sculptures resemble Medusa? Number 4. Why does the professor say this?
These are all very interesting and are fun to imagine, but all must be taken with a grain of salt.
Three. Literature.
Excuse me, Professor, I have a question about the coursework listed here.
Okay, what's up?
Well, this course is called Introduction to World Literature, right? But everything on this syllabus list you handed out is European. I thought we'd be reading more international works.
Good point. Let's go ahead and address this. Largely, you are right, and this is unfortunate, so I empathize with your concerns. The reason for focusing on European literary works is that there was a big push in the mid-20th century to standardize what was called the Western Canon, a set of great literary works that literature departments in several countries believed that all students should read. Of course, when I use the term canon, I don't mean the kind you would find on a pirate's ship. I mean a group of books. Now, this Western Canon is comprised of 3 eras. You see, literature departments wanted their students to gain exposure to literature from a wide variety of times, as well as styles. The first of these 3 eras is the Theocratic Age, from the beginning until 1321. Can anyone tell me or guess at what theocratic means?
Is it similar to democratic?
Well, in a way it is. They both end with cratic, don't they? Who controls the power in a democratic system?
The voters, the people, right?
Exactly right. But in a theocratic system, it's a god or a supernatural authority that has the power. The Theocratic Age, then, was a time in which most nations were ruled according to religious laws. Books of the Western Canon from the Theocratic Age include the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, Roman and Greek works like the Odyssey, and the Old English epic poem, Beowulf. I hope you'll notice that all of these works are epic tales with righteous heroes. Now, the second of the 3 ages covered in the Western Canon is the Aristocratic Age. The works of this age start with Dante's Commedia Divina and run up to Goethe's Faust Part 2, penned in 1832. Other works of this age include Cervantes' Don Quixote, Shakespeare's Ovid, the Canterbury Tales, and so on. This period saw the emergence of comedy and shorter forms of poetry, like sonnets and ballads. Is everyone keeping up? The Theocratic Age featured epics and heroic tales, and the Aristocratic Age saw the emergence of other styles, like comedies and short poems. Now, the third period covered in the Western Canon is the Democratic Age. We mentioned how people have the power in democratic systems. Well, in the Democratic Age, we saw writers from many different backgrounds get published and gain prominence. The works of this period mainly include English, French, and Russian writers, including Flaubert's Madame Bovary, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, and Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. Those already familiar with these works will recognize that these works incorporate new and interesting voices that were not represented in past ages. Indeed, the major advances in the Aristocratic Age include the psychological novel, the anti-hero, and the new voices and perspectives I mentioned. Now, admittedly, this is a very Eurocentric and, more particularly, very Anglo-centric grouping of literature. There is, of course, a wealth of literature from other areas of the world. East Asian literature, for example, was particularly rich, featuring works such as the Tao and Analects of Confucius, among many others. The Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita of ancient India certainly deserve attention, as do the Quran and the writings of the Arab philosophers who guarded the torch of learning while Europe slept through the Dark Ages. Of course, there is also a wealth of oral tradition from many other places in the world. Hopefully, in the future, this European slant will give way to a more eclectic sampling. I certainly encourage all of you to seek out this literature as much as you can. It is important to remember, however, that the 21st century world is, well, held together by the glue of English. I mean that English is the universal language now, and Anglo-American culture has the greatest influence throughout the world, for better or for worse. So, my point is, knowledge of this culture is useful for all of us.
Number 1. What is the talk mainly about? Number 2. What is the student's attitude towards the coursework list? Number 3. What reason is given for the nature of the course material? Number 4. What does the professor imply when she says this?
It is important to remember, however, that the 21st century world is, well, held together by the glue of English.
Four. Campus life.
Have you thought about what you're going to do this summer, Gloria?
Well, I can work full-time at the restaurant if I want to.
That's where you worked last summer, right?
Yes, and I'm still working there part-time.
Do they pay pretty well?
Yes, with tips the money is pretty good, but I'm graduating next year, so I'd like to get some experience in my field.
That's a good idea. Maybe you should try to get an internship.
An internship? I'd love to. It would mean a pay cut, but it'd be worth it.
Yeah, they don't pay very well, but in the long run, they sure do pay off. Not only do you get experience, you make all kinds of contacts.
Yes, it would be good to have some experience and some references under my belt when I start looking for work after graduation. I just have no idea how to go about finding a summer internship.
Why don't you go to the summer job internship fair?
I didn't know such a thing existed. When do they hold that?
Hang on, I've got the pamphlet in my backpack.
Great.
Here it is. Let's see. It's actually next week on the 16th. It starts at 9:30 a.m. and goes until 3 p.m.
Is it here on campus?
at the University Center Ballroom.
That's great. Is it casual or should I dress as if I'm going to an interview?
It says here that it's business casual.
So, should I bring my resume?
It's not mandatory, but it's a good idea.
Okay. Does it say there what kinds of internships are available?
You're into logistics, right?
Yep.
Well, they've got something at Office Depot and at Walmart.
Fantastic. Are you going too?
Yes, I'm going to try to get hired on at a summer camp.
Ooh, that sounds like fun.
It sure would be. It would be a good experience, too, since I'm studying to be a teacher.
Yeah, that would be excellent. Are there many camps listed on there?
There are 3. One's at Camp Tonawanda, one's at Wesley Woods, and the other is at Camp Webb.
Camp Tonawanda? I went there when I was a kid. I had a horrible time. The camp counselors were awful.
Really? Well, I'll be different.
I'm sure you will. I'll give you a few pointers sometime.
Let's just wait and see if I get the job.
You won't have any trouble. You're at the top of your class, and you do all that volunteer work.
Thanks for the vote of confidence, and good luck to you.
Thanks. I'll need it. Hey, do you want to go together?
Sure, we should go early.
Good idea. We'll look enthusiastic that way.
Let's meet at 9:15.
Number 1. What are the people mainly discussing? Number 2. What does the woman mean when she says this?
Well, I can work full-time at the restaurant if I want to.
Number 3. Why does the man want to work at a summer camp? Number 4. Listen to part of the conversation. Then answer the question.
An internship? I'd love to. It would mean a pay cut, but it'd be worth it.
Yeah, they don't pay very well, but in the long run, they sure do pay off. Not only do you get experience, you make all kinds of contacts.
Yes, it would be good to have some experience and some references under my belt when I start looking for work after graduation.
What can be inferred about the woman? Five. Computers.
A few years ago, director Steven Spielberg made a movie called AI. It told the story of someone who looked and acted like a little boy, but wasn't a little boy. He was a robot, right? I can see some of you remember that one. Not the greatest movie ever made, but it's relevant to today's topic. Who can tell me what AI stands for? Yes?
Artificial intelligence, of course.
Right you are. I guess we're all familiar with this term these days from playing too many video games. Though video games relate to our topic of artificial intelligence, I do not recommend playing them as a means of studying for the course. Back on topic. We use artificial intelligence to produce not only video games to challenge us, but also useful machines that perform human tasks requiring intelligent behavior. We haven't yet produced the human-like robots seen in Spielberg's AI, of course, but we are getting closer. In the meantime, we are using AI for some very important tasks. These include military applications, answering customer questions, and understanding and transcribing speech. AI systems are now routinely used by businesses and hospitals, and they are built into common home computer software such as Microsoft Office and the video games we all know and love. Now, it's important to note that there are several different branches of AI. With one branch called Logical AI, a machine uses deductive logic to decide how it should act. Information about the world, the machine's specific situation, and its goals are represented by logical mathematical language. The machine decides what to do by inferring that certain actions are appropriate for achieving its goals. Another branch is Search AI. This program is able to rapidly examine a large number of possibilities and choose the best option. This is used, for example, in computers that play chess. A third branch of AI is called pattern recognition. We can program a machine to compare what it sees with a pattern. If a machine looks into a crowd of people, for example, it will match a pattern of eyes and a nose in order to find a face that it recognizes. Pattern recognition is also useful for understanding and transcribing human speech. A fourth branch is Inference AI. With Inference AI, a machine is programmed for something called default reasoning. In default reasoning, when we hear of a bird, we infer that it can fly. However, if we learn the bird is a penguin, we have to reverse our conclusion about flight. Default reasoning allows the machine to change its original inference in situations like this. Now, yes, question?
Does AI want to make machines that are as intelligent as people?
Yes. The ultimate effort is to make computer programs that can solve problems and achieve goals in the world as well as humans.
How long before that happens?
Quite a while, I suspect. The Spielberg movie, remember, was set many years in the future. One problem is that common sense reasoning is the area in which AI is furthest from the human level. Another problem is that machines presently cannot be programmed to learn the same way as a child does. Machines can't learn from physical experience like a child does, and they can't understand language well enough to learn much by reading. Furthermore, computers are not social beings as humans are. Where humans pick up on a myriad of tiny, often subconscious signals from the people around them, computers cannot. Okay, let's recap a bit. AI, or artificial intelligence, is the attempt to program computers to have human-like adaptability and intelligence. There are four main branches of artificial intelligence, including logical AI, search AI, pattern recognition AI, and inference AI. Each branch focuses on one way in which human minds deal with the stimuli around us. Logic AI focuses on deductive reasoning using mathematical language. Search AI focuses on choosing appropriate actions from a list of possibilities. Pattern recognition AI focuses on extrapolating a larger pattern from evidence of a smaller part of it. And finally, inference AI focuses on using input to override default reasoning, like the example that birds fly. Yet discovering that a bird is a penguin can override that default reasoning. As you know, computers and machines using artificial intelligence have numerous applications in homes, offices, factories, laboratories, and even in your video games. These applications can only grow in number and importance as our ability to program AI improves.
Number 1. What is the talk mainly about? Number 2. Why does the professor say this?
The Spielberg movie, remember, was set many years in the future.
Number 3. What are the 4 types of AI discussed in the lecture? Choose 4 answers. Number 4. What is the professor's opinion of computer games? 6. Geography.
Good day, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at some of the effects the moon has on our lives. Can anyone tell me one such effect?
Well, I've heard that full moons make people do crazy things.
Yes, I've heard that too. Some statistics support that idea, but other studies refute it. In any case, you can debate that more in your psychology classes, but this is geography. So, what physical effect does the moon have on our planet?
Oh, okay then. Well, how about the tides? The moon's gravitational pull causes the tides, right?
Right you are. That's the information I was looking for. Thank you. So, we know the moon causes tidal movement in the oceans, but can the moon cause rain? Do the moon and sun create tidal effects in the atmosphere as well as the oceans? In the past century, an air tide, or rather a kind of shifting of the atmosphere, is being recognized. That specifically is what we're going to discuss today. As always, you're more than welcome to ask any questions you have as we go along. The possibility of gravitational tides in the Earth's atmosphere was first suggested by Sir Isaac Newton. Newton is most famous for what discovery? Anyone?
Wasn't he the gravity guy?
The gravity guy? Yes, I think you could say that. Newton was the first person to describe the force of gravity. Now, he came up with this theory on atmospheric tides while developing an explanation for ocean tides. Since 1918, scientists have been measuring air tides in the northern hemisphere, and although the changes in air pressure are small, their effects are not. Studies have shown that more cloudiness, rainfall, and storms are generated during certain lunar phases, such as the full moon. In fact, even before Newton set down his theories on tides, people were aware that lunar phases corresponded with the rise and fall of the ocean tides. More recently, we have found that the moon is even able to cause deformations in the solid crust of the Earth. So, much in the same way the moon affects tidal movement in certain ways, it also pulls on the Earth's crust as well, causing it to move too. Yes, amazing, isn't it? The ground we walk on every day isn't necessarily as solid as it seems. Yes, there in the blue sweater.
The textbook mentions that the moon can cause an atmospheric tide and that it can create changes in air pressure. Is this an air tide? And is it true that these changes in air pressure can cause hurricanes?
As I was saying earlier, studies have shown an increase in storms corresponding to certain lunar phases. While we cannot yet explain this in full, it does appear that the moon has an influence on the weather. Whether they directly cause hurricanes or not, well, we'll have to wait for further research to determine that with any certainty, I'm afraid. Let's look more at what happens during a full moon, though. Researchers at the University of Arizona discovered that at the time of a full moon, the temperature of the lower 4 miles of the Earth's atmosphere increases by a few hundredths of a degree. Now, a few hundredths of a degree may not sound like much to you, and you probably couldn't feel the difference yourselves, but it is significant. These researchers suggest that the moon warms our atmosphere in two ways. First, the moon's surface is heated by the sun and radiates thermal energy at the Earth. This energy is much less intense than the energy we get directly from the sun, but it is supplemented by a second phenomenon. The moon, of course, mirrors or reflects sunlight at the dark or night side of the Earth. However, the mirror effect is relatively slight because it reflects just 10% of the light of the sun. Nonetheless, as you all have experienced, I'm sure, that 10% is quite significant when compared to the 0% reflected during a new moon. The difference is night and day, so to speak, if you'll forgive the pun. Anyhow, what I want you to take away from today's lecture is the fact that the moon can affect our weather. While we still have much to learn, we may well be justified in blaming the moon for a rainy day.
Number 1. What is the talk mainly about? Number 2. Why does the professor say this?
Some statistics support that idea, but other studies refute it. In any case, you can debate that more in your psychology classes.
Number 3. According to the professor, why is the Earth's atmosphere slightly warmer during a full moon? Number 4. Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
While we still have much to learn, we may well be justified in blaming the moon for a rainy day.
What does the professor imply about full moons affecting human behavior? Skill Review. 1. Campus life.
Excuse me, I'm new here. Would you be able to give me some information about the night ride?
The shuttle bus? I sure can.
Great. When does it run?
Let's see. I think the schedule has changed since last year, so just let me have a look, okay? Here it is. It runs from 8 p.m. until 12:15 a.m.
Is there a fixed schedule? Does it come at regular intervals?
It runs approximately every 15 minutes.
Okay. Is that going to change in the winter quarter?
No, that's the schedule for the fall, winter, and spring quarters. Since it's only here to cater to student needs, it runs on a less frequent schedule in the summer since there aren't as many students attending classes.
I see. So now it runs Monday through Friday, right?
No, the night ride only runs on school nights, Sunday through Thursday.
Sundays too? That's great.
That's right, but not Fridays.
I won't need it Fridays. That's when I review my lecture notes. I can do that at home. So through the week, can I catch the night ride at the library? I usually study at the library.
The bus runs on a circuit through campus and the surrounding communities. The pickup points on campus are at Parrington Hall, the Communications Building, the Hub, Garfield Lane, and Meany Hall.
Isn't Meany Hall that old building adjacent to the library tower?
Yes, that's correct.
I see. So I guess I could just catch it at Meany Hall. Where would I get dropped off?
There are no specific drop-off points. You just tell the driver where you want to go.
Really? He'll take me right to my doorstep?
Sure, as long as your doorstep is within a mile of campus.
A mile? I think my place is probably a little more than a mile.
Well, you could go in that direction on the shuttle and walk the rest of the way. Or you could get let off at one of the local bus stops.
Maybe I'll just take my bike. Can I take my bike on the shuttle?
Good question. I'm not sure. But maybe not. They haven't got bike racks. Maybe you could do this. Take your bike to the bus stop, lock it up, take the bus to school, and then on your way home you could take the shuttle and get dropped off at the bus stop where you left your bike.
Do you think my bike would be safe there?
Well, of course. Those stops are not affiliated with the university, so I can't really guarantee that, but I know other students haven't had any trouble.
I might as well just ride my bike to school and back.
That's another option. But then again, you can't really ride your bike in the winter.
Why not?
Well, the winters here can be pretty harsh.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess I can try the bus out and see how well it works for me. Thanks for all of your help. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Number 1. What does the man need to know? Number 2. What does the man do on Fridays? Number 3. What is an example of the kind of information the student needs? Number 4. According to the woman, at what time does the shuttle bus stop running? Number 5. Which location is close to the library? Number 6. What does the woman mean when she says this?
Well, the winters here can be pretty harsh.
Two. Oceanography.
What exactly are reefs, and why are they so important? I hope this lecture will give you some answers to these two questions. Today, we will consider the history of reefs and the evolutionary changes they have gone through. It is important to understand the changing nature of a reef and how vulnerable it is to environmental influences. A coral reef is a bank of coral, the top of which can sometimes be seen just above the sea. Reefs are some of the world's most diverse ecosystems. An ecosystem includes all the living things in an area and the way in which they affect each other and the environment. Coral reefs have been around for millions of years and have undergone numerous changes over time. We can utilize coral reef ecosystems as indicators of larger global changes. This is especially important today in assessing the effects human activity may cause on the environment. Reefs may be found in both tropical and temperate areas of the world. They are geological features that support a huge diversity of marine life and provide a habitat for sea life. The shape and form of a reef depend on where it is located and what type of forces the ocean subjects it to. Temperate reefs occur in colder waters where the temperature averages below 18 degrees Celsius. They usually form on existing rocky outcrops. Temperate reefs are not as well known as tropical reefs, but they are still home to a diverse range of species. Seaweeds, such as coralline algae, produce calcium carbonate that helps build up these rocky reefs. Tropical reefs, on the other hand, occur in warmer waters that average around 18 degrees Celsius and can reach into the high 20s. These reefs are built by the animals that live there, especially algae and corals. Over time, the reef grows by building on top of the calcium carbonate skeletons of polyps.
Excuse me, sir, what exactly are polyps?
Polyps are small, simple tube-shaped water animals. The polyps divide and grow on top of their old skeletons or houses. Now, as I said earlier, we can use coral reef ecosystems as indicators of larger global changes. All sorts of information about the past can be obtained from rocks and coral cores. Coral reefs can tell us things such as which times the Earth experienced a rise or fall in sea levels. They can even inform us about events such as ice ages, huge volcanic eruptions, and meteors falling to Earth causing mass extinctions by wiping out whole species. Modern corals grow in warm, clear, well-lighted and shallow water. Since coral reefs grow best from the low tide line to about a 20-meter depth, Even relatively small changes in sea level can have very dramatic effects on coral reef growth. Reefs will always grow to the level of low tide. The location of fossils in a reef is very important because by observing fossils in a reef, we can accurately estimate sea level at the time the reef was formed. Therefore, fossils help us chart the various changes in sea level that have occurred over the years. Thanks to research by marine scientists, we know that sea level change has been going on continuously during the evolution of corals and reef organisms. There have been 17 cycles of sea level rise and fall in the last 2 million years. So, how do marine scientists get their information? One method they use is called coral coring. By drilling a vertical core through the reef, it is possible to see periods of growth and decline in the reef. It is possible to date these periods of growth and decline by looking at fossils in the rock and measuring the types of atoms present in the rock. The type of atoms present in the rock can tell scientists lots about how old the rock is and what the climate was like at the time. Sea level rise and fall may be caused mainly by movements of the Earth's crust and changes in the amount of water locked up in the polar ice caps. As the polar ice caps melt or freeze, sea levels around the world change. So, coral is not just pretty to look at. It is also a great source of information.
Number 1. What is the talk mainly about? Number 2. How does the professor explain reefs? Choose 2 answers. Number 3. According to the professor, what are polyps? Number 4. What reasons are given for changes in sea level? Number 5. Why does the professor mention coring? Number 6. What does the professor mean when he says this?
So, coral is not just pretty to look at. It is also a great source of information.
Three. Psychology.
We hear a lot of criticism from the baby boomers about the younger generations. This stereotypical idea is that your parents' generation thinks that young people are lazier, less respectful, less goal-oriented, and so on. Now, perhaps this kind of criticism is common to generation pairs, but there's actually been some interesting research in this area. Let's take a look at what it shows. Is the younger generation really so bad? Or are the baby boomers looking through distorted glasses, comparing their children to their adult selves instead of themselves at the same age? How is it that we can research such a topic? Well, psychologists have been giving various psychological tests to samples of the adolescent population since the 1960s. By comparing the data from these tests for your generation against the data from your parents' generation, we can get a picture of what, if any, significant differences there are. One major test was the IQ test. IQ stands for Intelligence Quotient. Intelligence is an idea that scientists use to describe why some people are better at academic tasks than others. The results of looking at IQ test scores from the past and from today show that the younger generation today is significantly more intelligent than their parents were in their adolescence. How significant? 10 points. This is a fairly large amount considering that IQ is only really measurable within a range of 70 to 130 points. This means that, on average, humans are increasing in intelligence by 1 IQ point every 4 years. Interesting, isn't it? So why would this be? Well, we have a few theories. First off, nutrition may be a key factor. More different kinds of food are more readily available today than ever before. This has been true for many, many years, so every new generation is privileged with better nutrition when developing in the womb. This is a critical period in the development of the brain. Nutrition makes a big difference during childhood as well. Think about what your parents used to eat for breakfast. Bacon, eggs, sausage, ham, steak, not a lot of vitamins. Another theory is that as the world becomes more and more complex, our brains have to develop more in order to cope with it. The brain works just like a muscle. The more you use it, generally, the stronger it gets. A good example is computers. My daughter is 6 years old and has learned how to navigate the internet, burn a CD, save files to folders, and a number of other tasks that her grandparents certainly can't do. You know, when I was 6, all I had to learn how to do was turn on the TV and flip between 3 or 4 channels. Your improved intelligence might also have something to do with your upbringing. Responsibility and self-reliance are both available and necessary at a much younger age than when I was a child. There are very few stay-at-home parents anymore. Many of you probably knew how to cook, clean, and do laundry by the time you were in high school. Sad to say, I never learned these things until I was in my mid-20s. So you're smarter. Is that it? Well, no. You've also scored higher than your parents on tests of extroversion. This means you are more outgoing, more open with yourself, and less shy in social settings. This is a great advantage in networking and getting desirable jobs. If you are socially adept, an employer is more likely to hire you. So why are you more extroverted? Well, once again, necessity is the mother of invention. You spend a lot more time outside the family unit and with many different kinds of people. Also, you are much more likely to move away from your hometown for university or for work. And you will probably move more times in your life than my generation did. This means you have to get out there and meet new people in order to maintain a network of social support. There is one disadvantage, though. The young generation today is more anxious and neurotic than their parents were at the same age, meaning that youth today worry more. I suppose this is understandable given the state of the world today, but it is also, of course, a negative factor for health and well-being in general.
Number 1. What aspect of intelligence does the professor mainly discuss? Number 2. How does the professor emphasize her point about how large the difference in intelligence is? Number 3. According to the professor, how did researchers gather data on intelligence? Number 4. According to the speaker, why are younger people more extroverted? Number 5. Why does the speaker mention cooking, cleaning, and doing laundry? Number 6. Why does the professor say this?
You know, when I was 6, all I had to learn how to do was turn on the TV and flip between 3 or 4 channels.
Four. Paleontology.
All right, let's get down to living fossils. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Make sure you take notes because there's always a question about this on the primary exam. Where was I? Oh yes, living fossils. Well, certainly not all species on Earth have followed the usual pattern whereby species last about 2 to 3 million years before they are replaced. This number varies between different phyla, but that's an average figure. Evolution does its work, and older species often die out because of climate changes and natural catastrophes. Species that adapt well survive in the new conditions, and the cycle continues. Some hardy species, though, have weathered the ages and remain with us today. It's truly amazing to think that these plants and animals have adapted to so many changes. In some cases, perhaps, there has been stability in their environment too. Nonetheless, these survivors are a scientific wonder because of their success. First of all, it's important to realize that we have what are deemed living fossils, but this isn't precisely the same as a Lazarus taxon. I'll explain that term soon. For now, let's stick with living fossils. A living fossil is a species of plant or animal that has existed since far back in the geological record and has never disappeared. These species haven't changed their form at all over an extensive period of time. What I mean is that they have lasted much longer than the average of 2 to 3 million years that I mentioned a few minutes ago. A great example of this is the Tuatara lizard in New Zealand. This wonderful reptile has been around longer than the dinosaur, and we can find consistent evidence of its existence as far back as 200 million years ago. Tuataras are a single living species with no close living relatives, but which are the survivors of a large and widespread group in the fossil record. Another well-known example of this is the Ginkgo tree. Ginkgo trees used to be part of a large group of plants, but, like Tuataras, they're now one of a kind. Perhaps this has contributed to humanity's fascination with them, imbuing them with supposed healing properties. Anyway, that's beside the point, I suppose. The key thing is that, as with all true living fossils, at no point have ginkgo trees disappeared from the fossil record. A Lazarus taxon, or Lazarus species, on the other hand, has done just that. Having disappeared from the fossil record for a long stretch, a living specimen is suddenly found. This is the case with the famous coelacanth. That's a tricky one to spell, so I'll write it on the board. Coelacanth, C-O-E-L-A-C-A-N-T-H. This fish was formerly thought to be long extinct. In fact, scientists can find no evidence of the coelacanth in the past 80 million years of the fossil record. Against all expectations, a living one was caught by fishermen near South Africa in 1938. Like the biblical character Lazarus, the species seemed to miraculously come back to life after everyone thought it was dead. It's a mystery why scientists can't fill in that missing fossil information. Of course, species do not just appear out of thin air, so all living Lazarus species are nonetheless considered living fossils. They're merely in a special category. Should a more recent example of a coelacanth fossil be found, the missing link would be filled, and coelacanths would cease to be a Lazarus taxon. They would be reclassified as just a regular living fossil. Okay, it's time to wrap this up, I'm afraid. In summary, a living fossil is a species that appeared long ago in the fossil record, and it is still around in the same form. It has survived against the odds, whereas most of its relatives have died out. Lazarus taxons share these characteristics, but they form a special class of living fossils because there is a gap in their fossil history. Because of this gap, scientists formerly thought these species had become extinct. Their sudden discovery on Earth today places them in the Lazarus category. Until that fossil record gap is filled, they remain in that special category. I see we're almost out of time. Do any of you have questions?
Number 1. What is the talk mainly about? Number 2. How does the professor emphasize his point about the unexpected reappearance of Lazarus taxons? Number 3. According to the professor, how long, on average, do most species last? Number 4. What do the Tuatara and the Ginkgo tree have in common? Number 5. What is the professor's attitude toward animals that are called living fossils? Number 6. Why does the professor say this?
Anyway, that's beside the point, I suppose.